Jordan, he certainly finished that last try. That was pretty spectacular. You don't see that too often in an international with a guy beating the number of players he did and cramping up at the end. He was getting pretty tired. He'd done a fair bit of running in that game. Ross, I thought he kicked really well, and he got himself into the game pretty quickly as well, and Will got himself in the game. He'll be frustrated about a couple of things, and at the same time he looked sharp out there. Probably he was a little bit limited for chances, but I thought they both acquitted themselves well.
There you are, and the team are back and very much ensconced in Carton House. They were back at 7 a.m. this morning. Gary Ringrose, bleary-eyed, doing a press conference, so they're already preparing for Argentina, which we'll talk about now as well. Eddie O'Sullivan is on the line, as is Keith Wood. Eddie, we'll get to the performance and what we can take out of it in just a second, but in broad terms, we touched on this last week, that really it's not the direction you want to see international test rugby going in these kind of events, and as a spectacle, you couldn't say it worked out brilliantly, to say the least.
No, I don't think you'd. If you bought your tickets to this game and your flights and everything a couple of months ago, and you find you're seeing two A teams playing, you'd be pretty disappointed. So it's a strange one, really. It's a strange one that Ireland play Italy at all in this time of the year. The fact that Chicago is another strange aspect, and then it's really not two full sides playing against each other. So hard to know what to even read into it, but I know it's a great idea. If you're going to ask people to go to a test game, then put on a test game. But look, that's the modern game now. It seems like that everything is constructed around certain aspects of it. Financial, probably the main one.
Yeah, €1 million is in the region of €1 million is what it was worth to the RFU. So ultimately, money talks. But we'll have to see how common this becomes in the future. As for the performance itself, Keith, what jumped out at you?
I think the performance of some of the players were very sharp. I was happy with the game. I know it wasn't the most exciting thing in the world. I thought people were a little bit overly harsh in relation to some of the things that didn't go well or go to hand, but we were looking at two scratch sides. Look, I think when you look at a game like that and you make £1 million in it, and if that was the difference between the RFU making money and not making money in a year, I think there's every business in the world would try and do something that would alleviate their costs. I do agree it's not the most attractive thing in the world, but you get an opportunity to see players start, and you see Larmour having an all run at 15. It's very hard to judge his performance, but he's bloody difficult to stop, and the second anybody was tired, he was blistering. So I actually think he could be a serious guy coming off the bench in big matches, because he is electric. Thought Carberry did pretty well, not perfect, but pretty well. And in a kind of strange game, I thought he played within himself, and I think there's a lot to be said for that. This is a guy who everybody talks about being very flash and very capable of doing most things. I thought he played a little bit within himself, and I see that as a positive, not a negative. I think it's good to get yourself into the game. He doesn't have to make it the Joey Carberry show, and he didn't. And I think that shows a level of maturity. I thought Tyg Byrne was brilliant, and he was everywhere in the field. And after that, I don't know that you can criticise too many of the Irish players. I think they all had a pretty good go. I thought Italy were poor enough. But job done. Don't think anybody got injured, and if that was the case, it's been a perfect trip away. So I'd have liked to have seen the stadium fuller, but such is life.
On Larmour, Eddie, so a hat-trick, his 7th appearance for Ireland. Rob Kearney is maybe one of the bigger concerns ahead of the game against Argentina on Saturday. He's got a shoulder injury. He's not expected to make the first pitch session tomorrow. We know Joe Schmidt, he's not a big fan of players missing the week of training prior to a game. How far is Larmour away from being thrown into a big game starting, i.e. this Saturday?
Well, I think he's basically an injury away, put it that way. I think if Rob Kearney said he'll play, but if he's not, I think Larmour will start. That's really the only option available, the way that the cards fall at the moment. Is he ready? Look, every indication is that so far he's ticked every box and he's done everything right. So you never know for sure, and you'd like to think he is. But, if he starts next weekend, we'll probably find out a lot more about him. Like, he was outstanding at the stuff he does well. Like, the guy has incredible ability. He's got pace, power, and his evasive skills are just ridiculous. Like, you can't get a hand on him. And if you don't get the first pair of hands on him, you never see him again. Like, he beat 12 defenders on the weekend. Now, keep in mind, that was the Italian A side, and they did miss 38 tackles. So on a team missing 38 tackles, Jordan Larmour will have a fairly good day out. There's still parts of his game that he really hasn't been exposed at test level on, and like, he's played very little rugby. Like, he's got I think 17 caps for Leinster and 7 caps for Ireland now. Just 24 professional games. So we're not sure about everything about him. There's parts of his game we're not sure. Now, there's nothing to say he won't deliver on those. And look, Joe Schmidt knows more about this guy than anybody else because he's working with him. So you'd have to defer better knowledge to the coach in that. But the areas of his game that probably we don't know about but are very important in Test rugby is his defensive positioning in the backfield, where he's covering a lot of real estate back there on his own, and getting his place right and that. Secondly, his tactical kicking himself. You can't run everything back at Test rugby or you're going to get stripped to the football. It's just, he's going to have to know when to run back, but if he's not running back, type of kick he wants to put up, can he find grass? He's put up a contestable. We don't know how he operates and all that. And then I think defensively is probably the one area we would say that if we could find a weakness in his game, that his tackling at times, he misses tackles. He missed one against Italy in the Six Nations that cost a try, and he missed one for Leinster under the sticks against Toulouse. So there's bits of his game, but no one's perfect. But the question is, there are things that when he gets up to the next level will be stressed even more, and I think we could find out next Saturday, reading between the lines, I doubt that Rob Kearney's fit. And I think if he's not fit, then we will see Larmour at full back on the weekend. There isn't really any other option.
Yeah. Schmidt talked, Keith, about maybe spreading some of Larmour's time over the next while at 15, on the wing, and even at 13, which was interesting. And if we reach a point soon where his running ability and all the great aspects of his game, if we reach a point where we feel, well, he has to be in the side one way or another. Andy Dunn posited the point yesterday. He was in studio. He said, well, actually, he might make it at the wing. That might be where he gets his first opportunity properly with Rob Kearney in the side over the next while. That maybe Jacob Stockdale might be under threat, as ridiculous as that might sound to say about a fellow with 11 tries and 11 test matches. Andy was making the point that maybe in Australia you saw when Stockdale didn't quite have the space or didn't get, wasn't able to finish off those maybe quote-unquote easier chances, that maybe he got found out a touch, and that's maybe the wrong expression to use, if you get me, so just work with it for the time being. But he felt maybe Larmour's a better all-round rugby player than Stockdale, and that might be where he makes his inroads first in this Irish side.
Well, I won't jump down your neck just yet, Joe.
Good. I could tell you were waiting to.
Yeah, no, I'm not really. Stockdale, and we said this last year, Stockdale is learning how to play rugby on the international scene. He's played you've talked about Larmour, hasn't played a huge amount. Most of Stockdale's matches have been internationals. He is, and it's a difficult place because your flaws get exposed. Depending on how things are going, you can accept a few mistakes and issues like that and not give him too much criticism. But there's an awful lot to work on. He needs to work on them. He needs to get better in defence. He needs to have slightly higher level of maybe dynamic running. I mean, he's a great finisher, but he is a different... Larmour offers something different, so I don't know that you just say they're trading off against each other. But I do think that you want to try and have a player of his skills on the field, and it may become the point that he'll be the player that is your impact at 13, at 14, at 15. He might be able to cover those from the bench when you need to do something different. It's funny, there was a lot of criticism for Rob Kearney, and I'm happy to put my hand up and say I was critical of him a couple of years ago. The performances he's been putting in the last year have been fantastic. He's backed it up. He's got that sort of joy in his game again. He's not as fast as he was, but he is the most phenomenal goalie. I mean, he just doesn't miss any ball that's kicked up into the air. He's defensively very strong. So look, you want to make certain a guy is involved. So Larmour could get a go there. I mean, I know there's been conversations over Ringrose at 13 and whether it might be Aki and Henshaw together or not. But look, for me, I would be looking to try and have a sort of defending 13 on the field Ringrose most definitely is that. Could Larmour be that guy as well? I don't know.
Yeah, it's very early in his development, in fairness to him. On the Carberry point, Eddie, Keith maybe mentioned certain aspects of the performance not being perfect and maybe playing within himself. Joe Schmidt said of Carberry, Joey didn't run today, and so I felt he was trying really hard to bring everyone else into the game, and one of the strengths of Joey's game is bringing himself to the fore, so I hope he gets a little bit of confidence from what he did today and mixes that up a little bit. So it does follow on from Keith's point that it was a solid, if unspectacular, performance. Tony Ward made the point today, Eddie, I don't think Joey Carberry had the type of game in terms of control for which he himself would have wished. He said in that frantic first half when a cool head, or more specifically an energy-sapping kick to either corner was most required, it never looked on the agenda. How did Carberry manage that first half, which was a bit sticky?
I think he found the going a little bit tough, which is completely understandable. I think it's probably his third start in an Irish shirt. You've got to learn your trade, and even the great out halves like Roland Garris, when he started out with Ireland, I was his coach at the time, and he found at times in early in his career some games more difficult than others because of the pace of it or the way things played out, and you just have to learn there's growing pains with it. Like, I take that performance in Carberry, and I think it's a fair assessment that he didn't run a lot, and maybe in his head going out he had his headset that he wanted to play more like a distributor, and he wanted to bring more people in around him, which is fine. But I suppose when you've got feet like he has and the ability to threaten the line, he shouldn't take that out of his game at any point, because the fact that he does that makes it easier for the people around him to find space. So it's a good balance to find there. But I think it was a good performance where things didn't go spectacularly well for him, and he didn't fall apart. His first cap against US on the tour, he had a poor game that day. He came off with an injury, but he had a really poor game. So he was in a tricky place at times, and that everything wasn't going exactly to plan. But he didn't let that bother him. And I sense as well, the overall arching dynamic of the game was that at half time we were 14-7 up while we gifted them 7. But I always felt it was just a matter of time before Italy cracked, because all we had to do was hold on to the ball, which we do brilliantly. You could be a bit harsh and say we should have put more points on the board in the first half, but there's no way I could see Italy living with us in the second half. And then once they coughed up the 2 early tries, it was curtains. So I think Ireland played a type of rugby where, they may not do much spectacular for a while, or they might be slow starts as we've seen, but they stay on the job, and eventually the opposition crack and they put them away. And 40 points in the second half is a pretty good inning. So I thought Carberry did very well. I would have no issues. He probably, on his own metric, think it wasn't the greatest game he's ever played, but it's test rugby. Some days you go out and you learn more than others. And I think he learned a good bit last weekend. I
know, in many respects we're just nitpicking here. It's where the team is, really. And actually, in some respects, Keith, the big news from Chicago was Joe Schmidt confirming that he is going to make a decision at the end of the series about whether or not he's staying on. He said, yes, by the end of November I will decide. I think it's one of those things where you've got to just sit down and make a decision. You can't let it linger for 2 reasons, really. And he said he wanted to give clarity to the IRFU and also for himself. If he is going to move on, he wants clarity for himself. He said he can't say he's ever enjoyed working with the group more than the group he's working with now. But he said, I've spoken to my wife Kelly, I've spoken to the kids, I've talked to Tim last night. I'm just trying to make a decision that is right for all of us, really. I mean, what do we have to do? Should we all write him a handwritten letter? Do we have a protest? What can we do to make him stay?
I don't know if we can do anything to make him stay. I think he is very much his own man and has consistently been his own man. And I kind of like the fact that he's not saying he's viewing up different offers or different chances. I think he's just trying to look at it himself and concentrate on what he's doing at the moment and then make a decision afterwards. Look, I've got to know him a little bit. I don't know him very well. I know he gets really frustrated about talking about anything else except for rugby at this particular time. So he doesn't even want to countenance having a conversation about this until after the November window. It impinges on him. He doesn't like it. He likes his focus to be just on the one thing. And I think if anybody deserves an opportunity to go and make a decision without being harassed the hell out of, I think it's him.
No, it's true. Eddie, I'm curious for your thoughts on this. Most coaches obviously don't get to make that decision. Only the most successful. You're talking Alex Ferguson territory and Joe Schmidt now get to decide if they want to stay on. And, Ferguson famously announced his retirement at one stage early in a season and lame duck manager syndrome kicked in. And you lose some of that authority, Players think, well, if you're not going to be around in 6 months, I don't need to overly worry about what you're telling me, you know. If you were in that position, I mean, I was curious to see how far Schmidt would try and kick that decision down the line. Would he try and boot it to after Six Nations? Would he wait until the summer? I mean, he's going to announce it in November. Do you have any worries as a coach over that lame duck manager syndrome kicking in?
Yeah, you're right that syndrome can kick in, but I don't think it would apply in this situation for one particular reason. And I think he has made up his mind already. That's my first thought. And I'm completely speculating here, so I have no more information than anybody else, obviously. I think he has made up his mind, but for him to give his decision like this week, it would have just been a talking point for the next month, and the games have become secondary. So he's not going to tell us till after, and then he will tell us after November, and that gives then 2 months for us to kick it around, whatever the decision is, and it's dead in the water then by the Six Nations. So this has been managed really well. It's a smart way to do it. You know, took all the oxygen out of it until you have to. But having said that, let's say he is leaving, and if you were kind of looking for a kind of a steer on this, it struck me as strange when they talked about, I think it was 2 weeks ago, about the strategic plan, and they made the statement that no system is dependent on one person.
That set off alarm bells,
I think that set alarm bells off for people, because it was kind of almost putting the foundations for Joe Schmidt to announce that he is going to be around. So, but look, that's just, again, we're kind of like trying to read between the lines. But I think if he says he's going, I think there's 2 months before the Six Nations. But I think the thing at the moment is, which is key, is that everything at the moment is all focused on Japan. And I think no matter what he says, the focus will come back on Japan and the World Cup. And it'll turn into, if he's leaving, a chance for him to leave an extraordinary legacy behind during his time in Ireland, in terms of winning the Grand Slam, beating the All Blacks. And now, you know, the cherry on the cake would be a semi-final or better. So I think the lame duck thing will not come into play, because there's too much at stake. Players are not going to, for a second, change their opinion or how they would go about their business. So it's actually be fine. I've only no worries like that in this situation, because the World Cup is a fantastic focal point for everybody between now and next September. So I don't see that being an issue at all.
Keith, it's Argentina on Saturday. They've 2 wins from 6 in the Super Rugby Championship. They beat South Africa 32-19. They won against Australia in Brisbane, and it's generally felt they improved as the thing went on and benefited from being there. Have you seen much of Argentina?
Very, very little, I have to say. I do, on the bits I did see, and a couple of the matches I saw, I think they were lucky in respect in that I watched a chunk of that South African game. South Africa were all over the place, were awful the same day. Same for Australia, you know, and at different times what you're looking for is for a team to be out of kilter for you to go and beat them. And there were times when it was like that for Ireland a lot, that you were hoping for those better teams to have a bad day. They're going to be tough, it's going to be difficult, but they are also a bit tired at the end of a long year, and they travel more than anybody. I do have a huge amount of time for Argentina. I thought for a passion team that they have been and were in the amateur times, they've managed to kind of hold it together in the professional era, but they're fighting an uphill battle constantly. So to be able to get those performances and 2 of those wins during the year is very impressive. With Ledesma back in charge, a guy I used to fight with a lot when playing in the same position, he's a guy who he wears his heart in his sleeve, but also he is Argentinian to the core. So it's to see whether they can keep a level of quality over a longer period of time. It's tough for them.
I was going to ask you actually about something relating to scraps in the past. Mike Ross in his book recently was talking about the, and I'll mispronounce this, Bajada, or it's Bajada, whichever one. It's their scrummaging technique. So Ross described it over pages of his book because he's a complete scrum nerd. But in short, everything works like an arrow and goes through the hooker. And so I suspect you might have been on the receiving end of that.
Yeah, it's no fun. They don't do it really so much anymore.
Do they not? Okay.
And they kind of stopped doing it a bit at the end. But what they used to do is play 3 props in the front row. The 2 props would bind on each other in the front row. So the scrum, if you can see my hands, the scrum would have been maybe 1.5 foot or 2 feet narrower, the way they'd actually do it. And they'd focus all the strength into an arrowhead in through it. And just as you're about to strike, they would be putting the pressure through. It was Federico Mendes to start, and then Ledesma. they'd be putting the pressure through the hooker downward on the back of your neck as you raised your foot to strike the ball.
Right.
And I'm 6 feet tall, and when you're trying to strike a ball and all the pressure is going down on it, I was never the most flexible man in the world. It's quite frightening, actually. But what it did mean was when you played against them, because they often played props, because Mendes was a prop first. I don't know if you remember his punch where he knocked out Paul Ackford Ackford in that match in 1990 as an 18-year-old. But when they had a prop at hooker, they often couldn't strike. So they wanted to hit the scrum and walk over the ball. And if you managed to stop the hit, they could never get their foot up to strike the ball. It would kind of go back against them on their put-in. But very, very tough. And like scrummaging, there was the 3 teams to scrummage against. France, Argentina and South Africa were just brutal. Yeah,
miserable. How do these 2 teams shape up on Saturday, Eddie?
Well, I think Ireland are going to have a pretty fresh team out there. Obviously Larmour is the big talking point if Carney doesn't start, but I think we'll go back to Earls and Stockdale, Sexton. I think Marmion will start. And then the midfielders will he keep Ringrose with Henshaw, put Aki in with Henshaw. It's hard to know because Ringrose played in America. So I think the front row will be probably our best front row available. Healy, best furlong for obvious reasons. I think the back row will probably be O'Mahony's Stander and Sean O'Brien. I think will get in because he will be a handful for them, the type of game he plays. And then the second row, who will he go? Will he give James Ryan a start with Toner, or will Henderson and Ryan start? They're kind of not too many talking areas. I think centre and second row are the 2 talking areas. But it'll be a strong Irish team and a fresh Irish team. But I would say that this is a dangerous Argentinian team. Seen them in the Rugby Championship, they played really well. The one thing they were guilty of is that they almost took too many risks at times. They played with a fair bit of ball in hand. They took risks in the offload. And it's one of those things that if it sticks, if they have a good day like that, and it sticks, they can score tries. And then again, they can undo themselves. They can make mistakes. But I think they'll quietly fancy their chance of a scalp here because if they were to clip Ireland now in Dublin, and all the talk is about Ireland, so they'll slip into town nice and quietly. And the captaincy is now changed. Matera is now the captain, and Creevy has been stepping back. I don't think there's anything big in that. It's just that I think Matera is 25 years of age, and I think that Ledesma wants to invest in him. But I think they'll fancy their chance a little, and if they play well, it could be a tricky game. But you'd like to think Ireland will be rested and ready. But I think we'll have to do a good job on this one to get past them. I'm looking forward to the game. It's really the first test of the autumn, where we find out where we are. Yeah,
total opposite to last week, really. Get your Heineken Star comments in. You can win prizes at the end of the week, signed rugby balls and other goodies. And there's a few people focusing in on the second row. Kieran on Facebook. On current form, he says Byrne and Ryan are our second row pairing for sure. There's no doubt now, surely, tough luck on Toner and Henderson. But this is business time. Ralph Holmes, though, on Facebook, does Toner's line-out work justify leaving Ryan or Byrne out of the team? It was interesting, Eddie, I saw on Air Sport you were picking your team to start against New Zealand, which is tricky at the best of times, and
it's harder to pick that Irish team, which is a good thing.
Yeah. So you had James Ryan out of the team, which seems almost sacrilegious at this stage. You want David Toner's line-out work in there.
I think that's the big thing for Toner is his line-out work. I think if you look at Joe's selections over the years now, and he's more options now, so that maybe the same pressure. But the line-out is crucial, and Devin is like a rock-solid line-out operator. Like nobody can get near him. He's a banker ball all the time. So if you go into a game and everyone's relaxed about the line-out, we're not going to have trouble at the line-out. It's a great starting point, and it's a very important launch pad for Ireland. You don't get as many scrums as line-outs anyway. So having a good solid line-out gives them lots of options. They can drive, which they're very good at, and they can use lots of wrinkles off the top. I just think that that's probably very important. And Toner gives you that kind of solidity in the line-out, and it also helps the hookers because Rory Best has been known to throw the odd howler out of touch, and Crone is not the greatest dart thrower either in the world. So having someone like Toner who's an easy target when you're under pressure on your own line or something, they all add up. So I think that's where Toner stands in the food chain, and I think I don't know if he starts this weekend against Argentina, but I have a feeling he'll go into the All Blacks game because we did a lot of damage to New Zealand off the line out in Chicago.
Yeah.
And I think there'll be the same strategy in place, and Devon will give you that kind of almost banker ball. And New Zealand have two very, very good locks in terms of putting pressure on you. So if you get the heebie-jeebies at line-out time against New Zealand, it could be a really bad day. So I just think for that reason, Toner is why I would put him in there. And that's my logic. No.
Why? No, you've explained it perfectly.
That, you know?
Why? No, totally. Why Henderson instead of Ryan, as a matter of interest?
Well, I think Henderson gives you more range. He's like a tweener. And the fact that he kept him at home, I think he might have him in mind for that. He's a 6-stroke second row, a bit like Tyke Byrne. I mean, there's not much difference between the two of them now. In fact, I would say Henderson feel the pressure of Tyke Byrne coming through. He's just like an extra back row. He's a good jumper. He's a great work rate. He's a great ball carrier. Now, Ryan isn't, but also Henderson has got that bit of experience, Lions tour, so I think that maybe leans it in his favour. It's a tough call.
It is,
I think Henderson will go in there, and if Toner isn't playing, say, against New Zealand, I think James Ryan could.
Okay.
If Joe Schmidt's happy with the line-out. That'd be my logic on it. No, it could be way off in that, but that's my thought.
Keith?
Yeah, I like Toner, I think, and as a guy who was known to throw an odd wobble in my day, having a guy his size would be comforting. But for me, Ryan is the number one lock. I think he is not just for his line-out play, for his general play. I think he actually has a huge amount of impact on the game. And I would have him starting as number one. And who would you go with him?
Right.
And I do see merit in having Toner with him at times. And I actually see merit in having both of the other two on the field, sitting on the bench. I can see Henderson. I think he is. I don't see him as a 6 at all anymore. I see him as a second row, and I think he needs to be viewed as being a second row. And I think that he could be the guy to go on at the end of a game and put a huge amount of effort in there. And I think it puts good balance with that. Tyke Byrne, for me, I think the level of flexibility you have with him as a light player is a perfect replacement for Peter O'Mahony. And that's not to say that he wouldn't get picked in on his own, but for giving us the strongest squad we have, Peter O'Mahony in the field, robbing opposition balls has been phenomenal.
Yeah.
A huge number of the big game moments that he has, both for Munster and for Ireland, are snaffling those balls that you just don't expect to see happening. I think Tyke Byrne has that ability as well, and is he's kind of a similar shape almost to Peter O'Mahony, a bit taller version, but he isn't a very big man by comparison to some of the others. So I'd like to see both of those guys on the bench. I think we could end up with a forward-oriented split for some of those games coming ahead. So I don't know. I just look at it slightly differently. I have James Ryan as our number one second row.
Okay, well, I'm sure we'll get into all that over the next week or so. Before you both go, so England won at Twickenham, a much needed win for them in many respects. And the big talking point obviously came at the end of the game.
And Esterhuizen tries to bring his nation forward again. Oh, Farrell!
Well, is that a shoulder? Is that a tackle?
Come crashing to the floor. Williams gets it off. South Africa wanted checking. Angus Gardner's put his hand to his ear here.
No, that's a shoulder shot.
Has the whistle gone for the final time? No. They are looking at it.
Have a look at the tackle by
The moment I saw it, Miles, from an English perspective, it looked like Farrell's gone in with the shoulder. We have to see it again. The crowd are booing, but the officials are absolutely right to do this.
It was all unravelling for South Africa as well.
Yeah.
Just getting to that point where you couldn't see them
Charlie, I'm just
getting over the 10-metre line.
On the last tackle, is that
this
right?
Is the tackle
yes, that's correct.
from Farrell on Esterhuizen.
I'm sorry, but
Replay's on the screen now.
It doesn't matter what you are, that is not an attempted tackle.
Right.
One shoulder, the other arm's away. He'll be very lucky if he gets away with that.
It's a decision that could decide the match.
Yeah, it's a big collision, I agree. I don't think it's a clear shoulder for me.
referee thinks it's okay from England's point of view. So does Ben Whitehouse, his assistant.
I believe there's enough of a wrap on the far side for it to be a fair tackle. That's the game.
Farrell believes there's enough of a wrap, and that is a wrap. And England lift the lid on the disappointment of the series in the summer.
And there we are, 12-11 secured. So not a shoulder for me, enough of a wrap, said the referee. Stuart Barnes certainly at first look and then on replay, Keith, was in no doubt.
Stuart Barnes got it right. He called it right as he saw it. We almost figured out, I was trying to write down a word so I wouldn't forget it. It's like something that you remember for illegal drivers that you'd have in golf. The trampolining effect. There was enough of a tackle in there because he bounced off him.
Yeah.
For me, there was no sign of a tackle. It was a straight shot from a shoulder. Now, that's on the one side. My reaction to that immediately is that is a penalty. And I looked at it again and again, and people were getting kind of hot under the collar about whether it was a yellow card or a red card. I agree with the fact that there was no citation. I don't think it should have been cited because all they would be saying it was a penalty. Was it a yellow card or a red card? Because it had to be a red card for the citing to be able to be upheld. I didn't think it was.
Okay.
I thought the connection was on the chest. I thought it was an incredibly risky tackle to make, and it was a tackle of a guy who was fatigued after 80 minutes. And there's a good edge to Farrell. I like that edge to it. But for me, it was a penalty.
Penalty, Eddie, no yellow, no red?
Definitely a penalty. I mean, I think the referee bottled it. English Gardner bottled it. He realised the gravity of the decision and he tried to find a way out of it, which was ridiculous. It was a penalty, possibly a yellow card. But at that stage of the game, it didn't matter. The clock was in the red. Certainly not a red card, I agree with Woody. But how they thought, here's the takeaway, which is ludicrous. It's now legal to do that every Saturday. Think about that. You go around hitting people like that every Saturday and it should be okay.
I guess
there's no way it's okay. No one's come out and said, World Rugby have gone very stum on this. They've said, there's no citing, which only tells us that it wasn't a red card.
Yeah.
Well, we know that. Nobody thought it was a red card. But what no one's saying as well, it's not a red card. By the way, it should have been a penalty, which is the right thing to say, because now, wait till someone next week does something like that and they get stuck in the bin. Danny Cipriani went in the bin for what looked a lot less down in Limerick. So that lack of consistency, I should say, is very annoying at this level. It's one thing, this happens at club rugby every week because it's a different level and all that, and understand that. But these are top referees making those calls. Very disappointing.
I guess publicly they don't want to admonish their referee and come out and say that, but given where we're going over the next few weeks, it mightn't be the worst thing in the world to do that.
Well, why not just fess up and say he got it wrong? Because the message is that there's nothing wrong with that. You can do that every week now, and that's not good.
Yeah, but no one's going to take that. No one's going to think that, Eddie, are they? Really, no one's going to say during the week, "Well, we can do that now." They all know it was a referee's mistake.
Why not, though? My point is, why not? If it's not a penalty in Twickenham, why is it a penalty in Aviva Stadium next Saturday?
Because it'll just be it'll be given though. It will be given. That penalty will be given in the Aviva on Saturday. Surely, Keith.
Yeah, but just on that, and look, I take that point, and look, I think that was a penalty all day long. It was a penalty before the conversation that we've had over the last few weeks about trying to lower the height.
Yeah.
For me, it's an incredibly dangerous tackle with the law at the present moment in time. If he was a half an inch higher, which is what Cipriani did with a lot less force, it would have been a red card. Absolutely. But what World Rugby are trying to do at the moment with the heightening of the conversation around this level of tackle is that they want the players to bring the height down. And that didn't happen. That was hitting. If there was a dip from the South African player, if he had stumbled into it, it's a red card. So you'd be saying to your players, great, you got away with it, but we really don't want you tackling like that. If you're going to tackle the ball, you're going to have to tackle the ball like half a foot or 9 inches further down just to make certain that you can spill the ball. You can't be hitting up at that height. And that's what they're trying to get rid of in the game. And that's why it's frustrating that it wasn't a penalty. That's all. Because to say that there was an attempt at a wraparound, there wasn't, as it turns out. So
no, I don't think there was. We shall see.
His reaction. And again, because it's funny, because people were complaining about Farrell's reaction that is the reaction of every player that's ever won a game.
Oh, at full time? No, he can celebrate all he wants then. No.
Yeah, dead right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We're out of time. Eddie, I will humbly bow down to you if that happens on Saturday at the Aviva and is not punished by the referee. Then we will have a big problem on our hands.
I'm sure you're right, Sean. That will be penalised.
Well, I'd hope so.
Anyway.
Right, enjoy the game. We'll talk next week. Thanks, gents. Good luck.
Monday Night Rugby on Off the Ball
with Air Sport, the home of rugby in Ireland. Visit airsport.ie. This week on News Talk, we're looking at Ireland's commuter health. And here on Lunchtime Live, we want to hear your commuter stories. Does the school run mean hours sitting in traffic? Do you stay longer in work just to avoid rush hour? Email me now on commuter@newstalk.com and get it off your chest. The good, the bad and the ugly.
Lunchtime Live with Ciara Kelly.
Thanks to VideoDoc. Tomorrow at midday
on News Talk.
Maybe your dream has a twin exhaust, or 7 seats, or leather upholstery. Maybe your dream comes with a marble worktop, or a walk-in wardrobe. Maybe it fits on your finger, or maybe it covers the world. Whatever it is, big or small, a personal loan from Bank of Ireland can help to make that dream come true. Search Bank of Ireland Loans, call us, or drop into any Bank of Ireland branch. Bank of Ireland is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. Lending criteria, terms and conditions apply. Over 18s only. Warning, if you do not meet the repayments of your loan, your account will go into arrears. This